Life is ultimately about combinations. Everything around us, all the structures, everything that we see, everything that we touch, including our own body, our own biology, is all about combinations. What do I mean by combinations? Well, things have to come in and fit in a certain way in order for them to work. If you look at the human body, we have a certain amount of oxygen in our blood. Different molecules and hormones and testosterone and estrogen and things like that have to be a certain amount in order for us to be healthy and even in order for us to be alive. Uh, One thing changes, one thing deviates, and everything falls apart. Right? If your body temperature goes up a little too high, you have a fever, you could even die. If there's no if there's no humidity outside, you can't sweat, you die. Right? Like it's very reliant or dependent on specific combinations. Right? If you look at planet Earth, like if it's too hot outside, again, if it's too cold, and all it takes is just some small changes in order for life to take place. Even if you look at Earth, where Earth is positioned in the universe and the Milky Way, the distance from the Earth to the Sun is what allows life to even be able to emerge on Earth. Right. What else? What other example could I use? Um, if you're driving on a highway, right? If you're driving on a highway, there's a certain way to drive. You gotta stay in your lane. You gotta maintain your distance from the other cars, right? You make one small move, one wrong move going at 80 miles an hour, you get into an accident. But everything is structured in a specific way. The combinations have to happen in a way in order for things to make sense. So meaning tends to arise from things being structured and combined in a certain way in order for those things to make sense to a human. In order for an intelligent being to be able to use those things and those systems, they have to be organized a certain way. They have to be combined a certain way. Okay. It has to do with perception, it has to do with consciousness, in order for those things to be useful to us. That's why chemistry is such an important subject. You know, if you look at chemistry dictates a lot of things about life, about nature, you know, temperature, taste, sight. It's all chemistry. Chemistry dictates a lot of those things. Um, Life expectancy, how long are you able to, to live and stay alive? If you look at the foods that we eat, the reason why we have to eat certain foods in order for us to stay healthy, in order, if you want your bones to be strong, you have to consume calcium. You have to eat protein for you to be in good shape and build muscles. It's all about specific combinations. All those things come with very specific uh, um, structures, with very specific criteria, or what's the word am I looking for? Content. What's the content of a piece of fruit? Right? Life is ultimately about combinations. Ultimately, when you look at it, and those combinations give meaning and sense to things. If you take those things and you break them apart, and you essentially break up the combination, then you have something else. You have something that may not be useful. You have something that's no longer valuable to people. If you look at the social structures that we create, there are systems that make sense, that work because they are organized a certain way, they're combined a certain way. And other systems are organized differently, they don't work. Okay. Um, if you look at our political system, you kind of say, well, why do some political systems work and why do others not work? Well, because they're not organized correctly. The combinations don't make sense, and therefore, in the end, they don't work or they don't last. But the ones that do work, that do have a good combination, they do tend to last much longer, and they do tend to make life better for those people, for those populations. If you look at a corporation, same thing. The corporations that are organized a certain way, they have a certain structure, a certain hierarchy, that have standard procedures that everybody has to follow, that have principles, ethics. They tend to last. If you start a company and you don't have any rules, people don't follow anything, they just do whatever they want, it's not gonna work. So the way things are organized, or as I like to say, to put a more scientific um, stance on it, combinations, the way things are combined. Because I'm not just talking about human things. I'm also talking about things in nature, the way they're combined, the way the molecules, the particles, if you want to use that, the way they are combined, the way they are added together, dictates what the actual outcome is going to be, and what the use is going to be for that thing, right? But then if you wanted to sort of extend it, you could say, well, when it comes to combinations, there's a bunch of different ways in which you could actually combine things. And that's where it gets interesting. There's a bunch of ways in which you can combine things. If you take a number set, when I say a number set, let's say you take five numbers, one, two, three, four, five, and you have a set of five numbers. You could organize those five numbers in a bunch of ways. I don't know the actual math, but you could take those five numbers and organize them in a bunch of different unique ways. You could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, 1, 2, 5, 4, 3, and so on and so forth. You could organize those numbers in a way where each time you could have a different order, right? There could be a different order in the system, and it could still work. But it's the same thing with humans. It's the same thing with society. It's the same thing when you look at the relationship between different groups of people, right? The relationships are not the same. You have different organizations between this one person and that person and these other people. Everything, every different combination creates a different relationship, which has a different dynamic to it. No two relationships are the same, because no two people are the same, and therefore no two organizations are the same. They may have the same structure, the same, sort of like the same ideology, but it's not quite the same, because the people in there are not the same. The relationships are different. And when you think about it, you're like, well, with humans, it's basically the combinations. It's like, how do you combine things? How do you organize? How do you structure? How do you put people together so that they can create something that could, you know, create value for society or for the members of that organization? It doesn't have to be for society. It could just be you're creating something that's going to create value for the very member of that group of people, right? So you got to pay attention to that. Pay very close attention. It's like, you know, you combine different personalities, that's something people pay attention to. It's like, our personality doesn't match, right? It's like, if you're trying to date somebody, do your personalities match? Are you compatible? Is there, well, the chemistry, is there chemistry? They use that word too. So, the more I think about this stuff, the more interesting it gets. Especially, I'm a numbers guy, in a sense where I like to just play with numbers in my head. The more you think about these things, the more interesting it is. It's like, wow, it's like the world really is built in very specific ways. Now, if we wanted to take it to the next sort of a more complex, in a more complex way, the question would be, is that a result of evolution? Because I started reading a paper that said, well, it's not necessarily that there is a determinism per se due to natural selection. It could be something where the different patterns that happen, sort of create something that makes sense and that get repeated over time until until it actually becomes the norm. So one example that was used was the human body and the shape of the human body. Why is the human body shaped the way it's shaped? Why is it that you have arms, you have legs, your torso is shaped the way it's shaped? Why is that? Well, it could be that inside the womb, the embryo as it develops, sort of there are different patterns that are sort of repeated in the cells as they grow, as they multiply. And then once it gets to a point, it's like, okay, now it's time to stop going in that direction. So your arms grow. Once your arms grow, and then it's okay, now it's time to grow in the other direction. Now your torso grows, and now it's time to go in the other direction. And those patterns sort of go back and forth until you end up with something that looks like a human fetus. Okay. So it's not necessarily that the external environment applied pressure, which then sort of created natural selection where some organisms died and some organisms survived. It could be that as the different patterns sort of happen over and over again, there's something that dictates the next step in the next step in the development, which then coincides with something that is mechanically valuable, right? Something that's mechanically viable. And I'll make another video where I discuss mechanics in motion, sort of like the laws of mechanics. Things have to be built and shaped a certain way in order for them to be able to move, right? Motion requires a certain shape and morphology. There's laws of mechanics, right? If you want to build a car, the car has to be built a certain way in order for it to be able to move on the road. Okay, there are laws. You know, it's universal. You can't just build something and then you put it on the road and it doesn't move. Well, it's the same thing with the human body. The laws of mechanics over time throughout evolution kind of dictated what the shape of the human body had to be in order for that body to be viable, for that organism to be able to move, which then allowed us to survive, to become a species and survive. So all those things come into effect, but eventually the organization or the combination of the molecules in the body of all those things dictated the shape and then dictated the mechanics and so on and so forth. So even the ability to walk, even the shape of your body, all those things are determined by the patterns and the combination that then determine the mechanics and how you move and the actual movement, the motion. And so if you think about everything else, well, it's the same thing for everything else. It's the same thing for the planets, the stars, the galaxies, the universe itself. So it's quite interesting. So, but then again, if we wanted to take this to the next step, the question would be, why is that? Why? Who was the person, the creator, that decided that the universe is going to be built this specific way, and these are the equations that are going to dictate how the universe is gonna be built? Is it how the universe is going to look? Was there a creator that dictated that? Was it trial and error? It was like, oh, I'm gonna run a computer simulation, and the computer simulation is actually gonna the computer system is gonna run like 1,000 different simulations, and some of them are gonna work, and they're gonna persist to a time, and the others are just gonna not work. Right? It's like when you're building a software, some of them work and some of them don't. Okay. So maybe it's that. Maybe there's a computer system behind it. Or is it a super genius creator? We could really extrapolate and take this to the next level. But in the end, I really just wanted to express those ideas about the combination. Life is about combinations. Life is about the way different structures are organized from the smallest thing like an atom, a cell, to the human body, to giant structures like planets and things like that. So let me know what you think in the comments, and Yeah, I'm very happy to discuss these ideas. Very happy. I'll be dropping more videos on this.